Hello and welcome to the 5th edition of My Cyber Why. This is a series where we talk to experts in the cybersecurity community about what they do and how they're helping to protect us from cyber criminals and to help businesses protect their important information. Today's guest is Dr. Christoph Veltsos. He is a faculty member at, I'm going to let you say it so I don't mess it up.
Minnesota State University, Mankato.
Thank you. And in addition to a lot of other amazing things that he does, you're an incredibly prolific author. So I'm excited to hear about some of the things that you're going to be writing next. But to kick us off, if you could tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, thank you, Diana, for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here. So a little bit about me. I am a faculty member, as you mentioned. I originally started teaching in the computer-related field, software development, networking. So to kind of backtrack a little bit, I'm originally from Europe, born and raised there, and then moved to the States and jumped into the American university system. And for me, my first passion was really computers, and that's where France in the mid to late 80s had some really interesting technology in the form of the Minitel, which was kind of this modem-driven all-in-one computer, which early on in the 80s was ahead of the game, and then it kind of held them back. And so as I was wrapping up my my high school in France, and with my decent ability to speak English, I said, okay, it was time to switch. And then I attended U.S. universities, getting mainly degrees in computer science. And in the mid-2000s, ended up switching towards cybersecurity, because every time I was teaching software development courses or networking courses, find myself spending more and more time talking about the security side of things. We had seen some of the big, in the late 90s, we had seen some of the big organizations already go through some denial of service attacks. We would see people launch web server code, and it was easy to do directory tree traversals, and other instances of things like getting impacted by malware on my faculty machine and such.
Not fun, right?
That's right. That's right.
Getting impacted by malware.
That brings up the curious side of me, and kind of an investigative side. So I had the opportunity in the mid to late 2000s to retool fully into the cybersecurity field, to take even some, I put myself through some of the certification paces. I went and attended some of the courses from a top entity, including did some forensic coursework. And again, that further opened my eyes about the evolution of the field, and the need for things like really solid incident response, and then the evolution of that in terms of triage and being able to handle the hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of events happening in organizations every day.
Yeah, there's nothing like forensics practice to make you understand the importance of, when people are saying, why do I have to keep all this data? Why do we need these logs? It's when you're trying to do the forensic work and you realize this piece of information I need just, it hasn't been recorded, isn't around, that you suddenly get this real appreciation for why we need to save so much information and gather it and aggregate it. So what do you do? You're a professor, you're a faculty member. I think you founded the master's program in information security and risk management. Is that correct?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I think a better question might be, what don't I do?
Okay.
I don't clean houses. Let's see. I teach, I write a lot. I consult. And I help. So in thinking about this, I was thinking, I help people grow. That's what I do. So I'm in the people building business, but in the process, I also realized that because I care about cybersecurity and I care about helping, especially the small and mid-sized businesses with coming to grips with the reality of the cyber threats that are out there, and the limited resources they have, the limited security strategy that the small business owners are even able to conceive of. I realized that I'm also in the cyber risk solving business, although there's no quick solution. but about, handling this, mitigating it, and then prioritizing what kind of security tools and controls and activities they're going to do to be better off and to be prepared for the ransomware, to be prepared for the business email compromise.
What do you think are the challenges that are different for the small businesses than for the larger enterprises?
Well, in a way, I'd say the challenges for the small business, from the conversations that I've had many years ago, I spoke to some Better Business Bureau events. Some of those challenges come from realizing that they are a threat. So I work and live in Minnesota. In Minnesota, we have a saying called Minnesota Nice, which basically means who's going to come and do anything to us. So you see people leaving, their keys in the car and purses in the carts. And it's a mentality that permeates throughout the culture here in the upper Midwest, but it's also a mentality where the average small business thinks, well, nobody's going to come after me. What do I have? And then you tie this into some of the breaches where somebody's able to leverage a third-party vendor or supplier and use that as the way into a much larger organization.
Yeah.
And what saddens me the most is when I see a small business go under because of some kind of cyber-related event.
I know, because the whole world is unfortunately not Minnesota nice. So, yeah.
That's right.
So another thing that you do is, I think you're just over 100 blogs right now at the SecurityIntelligence.com site. Is that, how do you pick? I mean, that's a lot of blogs. How do you pick your topics?
So I was so fortunate in 2015, IBM reached out to me and said, Chris would like for you to write for the Security Intelligence blog. And I said, let me think about it. I'll give it a try, sure. I was just starting a sabbatical, so I knew I was going to have quite a bit of time. And by the time my sabbatical year was over, I had written 35 articles for Security Intelligence. So from about May 2015 to June or August 2016. What happened was just a rekindling of my passion for writing, and part of it was to challenge myself with a different format of writing, because this wasn't traditional academic writing, but my institution was very supportive, and part of it is I had this passion, this rekindling for the writing, and then I kind of opened the spigot, and it just, once I got through the first few articles and I realized I could get myself in the flow and take some ideas and collate things from different fields. So in a way, what I do when I write is I look to translate material. I look to connect things from different disciplines. In a way, I love stealing from disciplines like marketing and psychology, human psychology. And even the investigations area in terms of fire investigators, human factors, accident investigators, and seeing what we can bring into the cybersecurity field. Because cybersecurity, as you and I know, it's not about the technology. It's really about helping the business, and in this case, helping the business stay in business. And so it becomes a question of communication. How do we translate the technical side of threats in terms of their impact on the business and business objectives?
Yeah, and make it really meaningful. I just read something about some professor there was some issue going on about a professor had explained something with an analogy, and like, how can you? I mean, to me, that seems like a perfectly good way to teach, because it's once we get that sense of, oh, aha, there's something I'm familiar with, that creates that mental bridge over to this maybe unfamiliar technical topic. And that's always one of the things that I've really loved about your writing, is that ability to take these concepts and really create these mental bridges to other areas for people to kind of explore new spaces. What's your passion though? Why, what's the passion about cyber? It sounds like there's been investigative interest. What else? What is, every morning when you get up, what are you thinking, like, I'm going to get out there and do this today, and this is why?
It's helping the business stay in business, but also looking to help with the communication side. So my wife teaches business communication, and I've learned a lot through osmosis. And she's written papers. She wrote a textbook about business communication, And the conversations at home are always about the communication, in a way, the marketing, the sales part that can and should happen in security as well, in terms of
Yeah.
how do we sell the value of security to the other lines of business in terms of what we can do for them, rather than being causes of frustration and saying no all the time.
Yeah.
So what gets me excited is looking for ways to make organizations more resilient, and also as kind of a side thing that's happened with me being more aware of enterprise risk
Mhm.
management discipline, especially after immersing myself with the some of the ISO documents, but also the
Mhm.
COSO ERM, the Enterprise Risk
Yeah.
Management framework that was updated in 2017. I realized there's a lot of areas where there's friction and
Yeah.
there's not proper necessarily governance and the culture is off. And
Yeah.
that all creates instability in organizations, not necessarily from a cyber perspective, but in terms of being able to survive and thrive in this really challenging era.
Mm.
So much disruption, so much, in a way, uncertainty,
Yeah.
the digital transformation that needs to happen, whether it's IoT or blockchain or, well, I'm
Yeah.
not going to go through the whole list of buzzwords of the day, but it's tough to be a business leader and take a look at what's coming out from the CIO's office or the CISO's office and figure out what kind of
Yeah.
new technology should we be onboarding, what kind of threats are there, and can we still onboard that technology and find a way to mitigate those threats?
We often talk about speaking to the business in the language of the business. I'm wondering, with the research you do and what you've seen, and we had a discussion about analogies and how sometimes, yeah, an analogy about a car or about flossing your teeth can actually drive and help somebody get that light bulb go on. What else have you seen that really helps bridge that gap when talking to the business about cyber?
So I haven't seen as much as I would like to, whether it's from an academic perspective or a more applied in the field of information security perspective.
Yeah.
Um, I will say, and this is a small plug here, and if it needs to be cut out, perhaps it has to be cut out. The work from the Scientia Institute, who did some work called the Cyber Balance Sheet,
Okay.
the version 1 in 2017 and version 2 of the Cyber Balance Sheet in 2018. And the part of the impetus for that work was to look at the communication gap, in a way, between the CISO and the boardroom and the expectations. Um, and
Mm.
part of that was the realization that boards want to be engaged with a lot more in terms of the metaphors and storytelling,
Yeah.
looking at trends over time, rather than talking about specific controls and technologies, and
Mm.
especially statistics that tend to focus too much on the technical side, as opposed to trying to come up with metrics that end up being a lot more pro-business, both in
Yeah.
terms of KPIs, key performance indicators, or KRIs, key risk indicators. And to me, that's the alignment and the maturity that needs to happen on the CISO side, which is happening for the CISOs, I would say, on the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 side. They are getting
Yeah.
this coaching, whether from some of their peers in some of the events that they're attending, or even in some cases from some board members that have
Yeah.
taken them under the wing and said, you've been addressing us with these issues. Instead, we want to hear more of those other ones.
Yeah, I agree. I think that yeah, CISOs are definitely getting more aware of how to have these conversations and how to bring the right data forward so the board or the C-suite can make meaningful decisions. I'm wondering, yeah, if you're seeing any. You talked about trends and talking to them and trends. Are there any trends specifically that you see? Is it is it days to patch kind of thing, getting those down, malware and counter rates, or what other trends are really meaningful? Because unfortunately, we can't always go out with the trend of our breaches, within the company. We can look globally at breaches, right? But hopefully the company corporate breach trend
Well, and
is like you're
hopefully we
not
don't
having
have so many
breaches all.
breaches on a regular basis that we
Yeah,
have to report these numbers. We only
exactly.
had 3 breaches this week.
Right,
Um,
right.
so absolutely patching rate. But to me, the patching rate should be a baseline, and it should be something that's in the high 90s. Um, and that's within a short amount of time. But we're also seeing progress there in terms of how do we help CISOs and the folks responsible for the patching process, prioritize their time and their patches. Because some patches should be applied right away because they are critical, but some might have lots of disruption capability. And so this is where if you have a more mature program, you're going to test them. You're going to have kind of a formal testing process where you evaluate those patches and make sure that by the time you launch them, especially if it's being launched around 50,000 computers, that it's not going to put you in a worse off situation.
Right, exactly. And actually looking at patching and programs and seeing what people are doing in the cloud with containers, and we're starting to just see even systems like the ones that aren't patched go offline, a new one that is patched comes back up, and we're starting to see some really interesting.
And that's
Yeah.
good. But with respect to the cloud, we still have issues with simple things like making sure that by the time we deploy some kind of cloud storage container, we have it well secured, and only the people that are supposed to have access have access.
Yes, yeah, exactly. The cloud is shared responsibility, right? Yes. We have to make sure, that both the cloud provider and the users of the cloud are still using proper access control and managing authentication and all that. I know there's not one simple answer just by the cloud will solve all your problems.
Well, that's job security for everybody in security, right?
Yeah. But it is interesting to see how it has shifted the conversation with the board too, because cloud has been such a big, transformative effect within so many companies, large and small. So you said you really like focusing on the small business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if there's anything, what would you like to see? How would you like small businesses, what would you like them to know or be aware of? One or two top things that you feel that they may not be as aware of now, or they may need to do a slightly deeper dive into to be able to secure themselves, not necessarily being. Sure. I get that small businesses don't always have the resource to be security experts, but being security aware is something all companies have to be.
Well, in this case, I don't have to be very creative. I just look at what the FBI is most worried about in terms of small, mid-sized business, and it's the business email compromise with, somebody taking over the account of the CEO, CFO, and then saying we have some new partners, transfer some money this way, or being hit by ransomware. And unfortunately, we've seen, starting in summer 2017, even very large organizations get hit by ransomware and have to shut down for several hours, in some cases several days, including hospitals, including small police stations or cities or counties that have to look at paying ransomware or trying to deal with the aftermath of having to spend weeks trying to restore from backups.
Yeah, it's true. So you've been co-authoring books. I know, one with Paul Ferrillo. You can hold it up if you want. So, and I'm going to have a link.
We'll get a kick out of this.
Okay, take back control. You ever think that you're going to be writing a book with your wife? Because I think it'd be fascinating to have some of those experiences.
That's a really good idea, actually. We do talk. I mean, she knows what I do and know what she does. It's a matter of like putting it as a project and then prioritizing that project and then making that happen. So we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Well, let us know when you write that book, because I think that with that business view and the tech view, I think it'd be a really interesting and a good read.
I hope so.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. InfoSec. And thank you, everybody who has been listening in for listening this month. And we hope to see you next time.
Thank you again, Diana.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.